Welcome to the Damascus Road podcast. On the road to Damascus, Paul had a radical encounter with Jesus and his life was changed forever. That is what we hope and pray for here. Now, on to this week's episode.
So the funny thing about your series, The Chaos Dragon, is that I have a friend, one of my best friends in the world. Her name is Nicole. She and I have this shorthand that we use with each other over text. Whenever we're going to do something hard, something that we've been avoiding, or maybe something that's just really annoying or something that overwhelms us, we call it dragon slaying. We will text each other the dragon emoji, followed by the fencing emoji, to fight the dragon. That can just be shorthand. And usually that's a heads up that, the other one can pray for whoever. And it can be stuff that we've procrastinated on or just don't love to do. Stuff like making dentist appointments, her, or having blood drawn, me, thank you, no. It can be dropping off clothes that you've had running around in your back trunk for the last 8 weeks, dropping them off to the thrift store finally. It can be getting your taxes done or starting counseling or having a difficult conversation with somebody that you need to have. But whatever it is, whether it's something that's super annoying that you've been putting off or something that we're outright afraid of doing, usually, it's because of something that's like either generating a sense of shame or just intimidation. I even have a playlist that I listen to when I need to pump myself up to do hard things. No joke, this was on my phone before Ryan was like, hey, why don't you come talk about the Chaos Dragon? I dance around to this in my house. I throw on headphones, or sometimes I'll do it right before a meeting. So it's probably obvious to you guys right now that I can be intimidated by a lot of things. In fact, I would go so far as to say that I am unnecessarily afraid a lot of the time. Classic Enneagram 6 right here for any of you. And I don't think I'm alone in that. There's plenty of stuff to be intimidated by. Even the regular non-scaredy cat people can get afraid. Whether it's a project for work, school assignments, that difficult conversation that you've been meaning to have with your best friend, a boundary you need to set with a family member, or just a dentist appointment that you've put off for months and months because you hate the dentist. We've all got dragons that need to be slayed, right? So how do we slay these dragons in our lives? Does the Bible have anything to say about that? I think so. I heard recently that we need to hear stories from the middle. Not stories from beginning to end with the pretty bow all tied up, nice and neat, but we need to hear stories from the messy middle. The book of Judges is a little bit like that. Old Testament scholar Dr. Sandy Richter calls the book of Judges liminal space because it's kind of in that in-between time between the Israelites breaking into the promised land and before the establishment of the golden monarchy under King David. Quick side note for you nerds out there, I'm referencing Dr. Richter throughout this talk. Her book, Epic of Eden, a Christian intro into the Old Testament, is absolutely fantastic. Would highly recommend it if you have 12 hours in Chicago O'Hare Airport or anything like that. Or something, who knows. So this idea, you guys have been tracking the Chaos Dragon throughout the Bible, starting in Genesis. Last week, you talked about entire nations becoming agents of chaos and destruction as you looked at God's rescue of Israel out of Egypt in the book of Exodus. God shows himself as unrivaled in his power. He defeats the ingrained dragons of nationalism, economic idolatry, and fear that create oppression for the weak and vulnerable. And he's faithful to hear and rescue those who cry out to him. Maybe it's just me, but I find it really helpful and humbling to hear that no, it's not just a bunch of bad apples that create oppressive systems. Evil animates and enhances the chaos of evil empires. And we're all far more open and vulnerable to that kind of manipulation than we care to admit. So today, we're going to watch what happens when the Israelites finally get into the land God promised them. Finally, woo! No more slavery, no more famine, no more oppression, just rescue, and we're in the land that God promised. Awesome, right? Not exactly. As we'll see from the book of Judges, it's an insightful commentary on the way that the Israelites become their own worst enemies. As it turns out, they're going to be just as bad as the Egyptians that they just escaped. The book of Judges has this brilliant way using its literary design to offer a self-critique, almost like putting a mirror up to the Israelites themselves. And it's almost this way of looking back on the pre-kingly era, before Solomon, before David, before that golden age. It's kind of like, who were we in this mythical past? It's almost like an origin story. Dr. Richter compares it to the Wild West, something you guys are familiar with. There are these pockets of order and justice, especially when a judge appears and brings peace. But in general, it's kind of a might equals right space that whoever's got the biggest army gets to kind of make the rules. And a frequent refrain throughout the book is that in those days, Israel had no king and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And the action is a commentary on what happens when that kind of environment is the norm. So as you can see from, I think we're at the slide. Thank you, Peyton. Gold star. The story has this like recurring cycle where the Israelites enjoy peace because of their obedience, but after a while they fall into idolatry and sin. God lets them experience the consequences of their actions and follow other gods. He allows other nations to oppress Israel. The people repent and cry out to God, and then he raises up a judge to deliver them from their enemies. They live in peace while that judge rules, and then when that judge dies, eventually the cycle starts all the way over again. This happens 12 times throughout the book. And in the beginning, the judges start off as really good. You kind of get these 3 or 4 judges that are really solid. But from Gideon onward, they get progressively worse. And it's almost like the author has structured it in this way to help us realize that this nation is spinning out of control by the end of the book. It becomes clear that the Israelites need a king to step in and right the ship before it completely runs aground. They need a good judge, a good ruler that will truly deliver them and who's not going to give in to personal failure or crash the ship, as it were. And to me, that sounds like foreshadowing. Maybe it's because I'm an English major, but I can see where that's going to go. Maybe we too experience cycles of obedience and disobedience, rescue and idolatry. Maybe we too need a deliverer to break through those cycles and free us from creating our own destruction. Let's have a look at one such story. In Judges 4, the Israelites are in a cycle of rebellion and oppression. And once again, they've been under this thumb of an oppressor. This one's name is Sisera, a tyrannical military general for about 20 years. On a practical level, the enemy king, Jabin, who's oppressing them, and Sisera have been occupying one of the most important farming areas and transportation routes throughout the whole area. So in losing this vital trade highway, their food production and economic capabilities are crippled. We're talking about subsistent existence. God promises that he will deliver Barak into Sisera into Barak's hand, but Barak seems to doubt God's word to him through Deborah, because he begs her to go with him, saying, I will go, but only if you go with me. He doesn't trust that God will actually be with him. He needs her as proof. Maybe he thinks that Deborah is God's favorite, and without her, he's not going to protect Barak. Maybe you felt that way at times, that God has favorites, people that seem to have his favor and that things come easily to them. I do this more often than I would care to admit. God's not going to go with me. I need to put myself near someone God actually likes or favors. I need to cozy up to the right person, either someone in my life who seems to be really close to God, or the right theologian or denomination or camp. Then I'll be close to God. It's holiness by proxy rather than holiness outright. But if we do that, the tension between divine promise and human fear only builds. It doesn't get resolved. Because we're only secure as long as we're next to that person. We're only secure as long as we're in the right camp, a part of that right ministry, or in that right job. Barak is called to trust God, but all he can see is the threat against him. Let's read. Deborah said to Barak, get ready. This is the day the Lord will give you victory over Sisera, for the Lord is marching ahead of you. So Barak led his 10,000 warriors down the slopes of Mount Tabor into battle. When Barak attacked, the Lord threw Sisera and all his chariots and warriors into a panic. Sisera leaped down from his chariot and escaped on foot. Then Barak chased the chariots and the enemy army all the way to a very long town, killing all of Sisera's warriors. Not a single one was left alive. So God thwarts the enemy, absolutely trounces those 900 state-of-the-art aircraft carriers, iron chariots, with just foot soldiers. God doesn't need the latest tech to prove himself powerful. He doesn't need the flashiest gadgets or the best marketing scheme. He can use a ragtag group of barely trained soldiers that were recruited from the very same impoverished region that were threatened by the enemy. But if you notice, the real threat isn't over yet. If you don't take out the whole enemy, he'll just come back. If Sisera is still out there, the Israelites are still vulnerable. He could just get another army and come at him again. Verse 17. Meanwhile, Sisera ran to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, because Heber's family was on friendly terms with King Jabin of Hazor. Okay? So Sisera, our enemy commander, takes refuge with a woman named Jael. From this little bit here, it sounds like that her husband is a war profiteer. He's an iron worker who's cozied up to Israel's enemies in order to sell them his skills to make more advanced chariots. At a glance, it sounds like he's an opportunist who's making money off the war. It doesn't matter to him that he's aligning against God's people. And to me, this makes perfect sense that Sisera would find refuge with a snaky family, one whose allegiance can be bought by the highest bidder. He just needs to promise her a little coin and she'll protect him. Quote, Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Come into my tent, sir. Come in. Don't be afraid." So he went into her tent with her and she covered him with a blanket. Okay. So war bro's wife shelters enemy of the state. Got it. "Please give me some water," he said. "I'm thirsty." So she gave him some milk from a leather bag and covered him again. "Stand at the door of the tent," he told her. "If anybody comes and asks you if there is anyone here, say no." Whoa! Now he's asking her to lie for him? Deceive people for him? That's a really snaky move. This makes perfect sense. She and her husband are the bad guys. Of course they're going to lie for and protect the tyrant who's been oppressing God's people. Even if God defeated the army, evil's allowed to endure. It's unbeatable. And all because whenever those people are given a choice, they're always going to choose themselves. Am I right? They aren't from the right side of history, so we can't expect them to do the right thing. Or can we? When Sisera fell asleep from exhaustion, Jael quietly crept up to him with a hammer and tent peg in her hand. Then she drove the tent peg through his temple and into the ground, and so he died. When Barak came looking for Sisera, Jael went out to meet him. She said, "Come, and I will show you the man you are looking for." So he followed her into the tent and found Sisera lying there dead, and with a tent peg through his temple. So that day, Israel saw God defeat Jabin, the Canaanite king, and from that time on, Israel became stronger and stronger against King Jabin, until finally they destroyed him. How you guys doing? So I kind of hammed it up there at the end, but I wanted to draw out a point. This story is all about inverting our expectations. In a lot of ways, this story is a replay of Genesis 3. It's just got all the slots rearranged. This rearranging kind of creates a commentary that the author expects us to meditate on. So if we remember, Genesis 3 is Adam and Eve face to face with a test from the serpent about whether or not to trust God. So you've got two humans have to decide whether or not God will keep his word to be good to them, all while an agent of chaos sows mistrust and doubt in their minds. That's Genesis 3. Here we have, instead of a husband and wife, we have a reluctant general and a female judge, Barak and Deborah. Welcome to Eden 2.0. These two are hardly the heroes that we imagine. And instead of an actual chaos dragon, we have a foreign military commander whose name sounds really snaky. Sisera. Sisra. He also asks to be concealed using lies and deception. And instead of an apple or a fruit of a tree, we have a woman needing to choose whether or not she'll harbor an enemy of God's people. And so this clever juxtaposition, this putting two things next to each other, the authors are playing with three main ideas that I think they want us to consider. Number one, humans can become dragons. Number two, rescuers are not always who you think they are. Number three, defeating evil sometimes involves using kitchen elements. That's because you guys have a great food culture here in Tucson. I have great faith in you. So first off, humans can become dragons. Sisra, with his snake-sounding name, does snaky, dragonish things. He oppresses the Israelites, then convinces someone to lie and deceive others, all for his advancement and safety. It sounds like the author of Judges is saying that humans become less human when they take on the characteristics of the snake. It's sort of like those folks either that have been married for a really long time or have a dog for a really long time, and both spouses end up either looking like each other or they end up looking like their dog. Have you ever met people like this? When we hang out with people over a long period of time, we take on their characteristics. If we do snaky, dragonish things, we're going to become the dragon. When we lie and deceive others, when we oppress others, when we use dragon-like behavior, we become dragon-like. It's not just that the chaos dragons exist and should be respected. It's not just that empires can be animated by evil and turn into agents of destruction that put the most vulnerable at risk. It's that individual humans can give in to our baser desires and become dragons ourselves. The darker truth that the Bible wants to communicate to us is that our problem isn't just them out there. Our problem is the dragon in here. You guys are nerds, so I can say this. The Chronicles of Narnia. Any fans? Yes! Woo! Well done. For those of you that didn't raise your hand, your summer assignment is to read the Chronicles of Narnia. Eustace in the Chronicles of Narnia is a human that falls asleep on a bunch of treasure and wakes up as a dragon. Humans fall asleep on cursed treasure with dragonish thoughts of greed and vengeance or power in their hearts and wake up no longer human, but as dragons. In myths and legends, dragons covet and hoard gold. Throughout human history, humans have craved all kinds of things that aren't ours. People often covet material possessions like money and homes, but also relationships, status, and even personal qualities or experiences. See if any of this hits home for any of you. Material possessions. Which of these do you crave? Wealth, expensive cars, designer clothes, luxury homes are common objects of covetousness. But what about relationships? People may covet their friend's boyfriend or girlfriend or spouse. It might not even be about that person, just that they have found their person. Where's mine, we might ask. Others crave the close friendships or work confidences that they see that others have. Sometimes it's just about being that person for someone or having a super close friendship that they do everything with. Folks that have seen such close work or friend relationships on shows like Grey's Anatomy or Friends crave that in real life. For others, it's status and power. Covetousness can also show up as a desire for social status or authority or recognition or admiration from others. Still, for other things, it's personal qualities, desiring qualities like good health or intelligence or talent or attractiveness that we perceive in other people. Finally, I found myself doing this yesterday. You guys have great food here, and I joke, but it's easy to covet the experience of others, whether it's travel or love or education or experiences that provide happiness, comfort, and security. These are all things that we can just very easily covet. Dragons don't just covet, though, they hoard, storing up things just for the sake of having it, not putting it to use. Only thinking that others will steal their gold, they isolate themselves, far away from others, growling, snapping, distrusting others' motives, because everyone must be obsessed with gold just like they are. right? See if you hear yourself in any of these. We hoard knowledge because sometimes it feels really cool to be the one in the know. We hoard opportunities because we want to do them. We want the credit or the applause. We are short-tempered and snappy at others, irritable and angsty. We assume the worst about others and write an unflattering story about someone's character. We isolate, not showing up with our real selves, convinced that people want what we have and are dead set on taking it away from us. I have really dear friends right now that are struggling with contentment. They have done everything right, saved and been responsible, but they still can't afford a house in this crazy economy. I see some heads nodding. They look around their church at people who have $1 million houses, and the dragonish thoughts just kind of creep in. Through no fault of their own, they are fighting off that feeling of, those people have it all figured out. They are too snooty for us. I can't open up to them. They have caught themselves isolating, purposefully not getting to know others because of the whispers of the dragon in their hearts. I think the dragon is seductive and sly, slinking into our thinking through our own consumer culture. So you're probably not alone if you've been nodding and saying yes to a bunch of these things. I don't think experiencing these things makes us bad people, but I think we can become fully grown or fully blown dragons if we give in to their seductive song. We'll become sharp, hot-tempered, scaly, and hugely unpleasant, if not downright dangerous to be around. One of my favorite quotes in talking to non-Christians about the gospel is this one. It's a line from Alexander Solzhenitsyn in the Gulag Archipelago where he says, "Gradually it was disclosed to me that the line separating good and evil passes not through states, not between classes, nor between political parties either, but runs right through every human heart. I am the problem. You are the problem. Our enemies are not them. My enemy is the dragon that I can sometimes become. The evil isn't out there, it's in here. It's my dragonish thoughts, my dragonish heart, my dragonish desires. The goal isn't just, as a Christian, do this, don't do that. I don't need behavior management. I need a way to become human again. And not just for myself, but for the world too. Point number 2, rescuers are not always who you think they are. Sometimes the rescuers are female when they are usually male. Sometimes the rescuers are afraid and unsure when we expect them to be dashing and decisive. And sometimes the wife of a war profiteer, who we all expect to be in it for a buck, ends up being the right and just hero. God's rescuers aren't always who we would expect. And that's really good news, because it tells us something incredibly important about God's character. Jael is a good Samaritan-like figure. The hero is a woman, not a man, and she further delivers Israel from their enemies with a tent peg, not a sword or a chariot. She's the embodiment of the true hero of Israel, the archetype that is later emulated in Psalm 20, which reads, "Trust not in chariots, some trust in chariots and some in horses, like Sisera, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God." The true Israelite doesn't need a big army or the latest military technology. The true Israelite trusts that God will deliver them, and the hero can be an unassuming housewife. It doesn't have to be the general we all expect. But if we were paying attention, and this one's buried in the text, the author of Judges goes one step further. Jael is the descendant of Cain. Cain, the one who was so jealous of his brother that he laid in wait to kill him. Cain, the one God comes to and tells him to do battle against the snaky sin in his heart that wants to overcome him. But Cain doesn't fight back and instead becomes the Bible's first murderer. That Cain is Jael's ancestor. But here we have an enemy of Israel that acts more like a true Israelite than most of the Israelites do. Why is that good news? The bad guys, the line of Cain, can become the good guys. There is no one who is too far gone that they cannot be on God's team or cannot be a part of God's story. That means that God's character is way better than we ever expected. God doesn't have a static ho-hum story that's passively playing out around us, and we're stuck on the teams we're on, and it doesn't matter what we do. We just have to kind of say our lines and go home. No! God's story is wide open to anyone who wants to turn and partner with him. It's the most inclusive exclusivity there is. Exclusive because he has a goal. There's a definition. We're headed somewhere. We're about something. Do we live in a desert or something? What's the deal? Whew. But God's story is inclusive because he wants anyone, everyone on his team. Doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, who your family is, or what you've done in the past. Even the descendant of Cain, who failed his test to turn and trust God and instead killed his brother out of jealousy and anger. Even that descendant God wants and uses to bring about rescue. She can be the hero and save many others. And I don't know about you, but that's incredibly good news to me. For the longest time, I was really locked up about whether or not God was open to rescuing everybody. In my tiny rule follower brain, I saw lines of us and them, in and out. And I always felt on the outs. I saw relationships as transactional. You do this, God does that. In other words, my early discipleship was fostered in a rigid framework where God had favorites. And I just wasn't one of them. But this story flies directly in the face of all that. God is willing to partner with anyone who wants to be on his team and be about his business. He delights in turning the them into an us. And he frequently does this across our polite lines of what is sensible or acceptable. He'll use anyone as a rescuer. And I kind of have to ask, are we living day to day like that's true? Or have we relegated the best seats to a select few? Where might he be calling us to participate in that rescue? Finally, point number 3. Defeating evil sometimes involves using kitchen elements. Jael takes Sisera out with a tent peg, a hand-carved wooden tent peg, something that would have been as commonplace for a semi-nomadic culture as frying pans are to us. She uses what she has at her disposal to get the job done. God can use anything, and frequently he delights in using ordinary things to deliver his people from danger. As humans, we too easily trust in things that are shiny, impressive, and powerful. We want the big guns, the newest technology, the biggest bank accounts. We think these things will keep us safe or protect us from the bad guys. But God doesn't need any of these things. And too often our draw to these things betrays our lack of real trust in God to rescue or defend us. No, all God needs is a tent peg, a common domestic item. The Israelites had thousands, and he only needs one. So what about us? How do we translate this into our everyday lives? What do I want you guys to remember in an hour when you're eating lunch? I think if I had to boil down Jael's strategy for dragon slaying, I'd say this. She clings to just 2 things and improvises the rest. Here's Jael's tools for dragon slaying. Number 1, dragons are cool, but you don't really want to be one. Number 2, frying pans get the job done. So dragons are cool, but you don't really want to be one. If our goal is to become human again, to shed the dragon skins we've picked up along the way, then we need someone to transform us. There is one who can cut away the dragon skin we've wrapped ourselves in. There is one who can free us from its grasp and restore the humanity that we've fretted away. We just need to turn our allegiance from the systems that we've already given it to, the cultural, political, military, and technological systems, we've pledged our loyalty to, and give it to him. It doesn't have to be fancy. It can be as simple as changing your mind in a dusty tent somewhere. Frying pans get the job done. But how? Jesus cuts away our dragon skin not with a sword, but with common kitchen elements, with a cup and some bread. In taking the bread and the cup, we are proclaiming his death and resurrection, and we are confessing that we are the chaos dragons that conspired to kill him. Our greed, our self-preservation, our pride has calcified our hearts, and we've become the deceivers, deceiving each other and ourselves. We are the enemy. We are the ones who bite and deceive each other, falling asleep on treasure with dragonish thoughts, and over time becoming less than human. But in participating with him in his death and his resurrection, we submit to him, give our allegiance to him. He will cut off our scaly skin if we ask him. He alone knows exactly how far it goes, neither surprised nor scared by the process. He alone knows where it ends, cutting all of it off, but not killing us. We can expect a little bit of pain. Conviction and confession feel uncomfortable at times. But as Eustace says, it hurt, but it was a good pain. We participate with him in his death, and we are risen to life again, becoming more human than we ever dared hope. Just like Jael with a tent peg, it was the same way with Jesus when he picked up the bread and the wine. Two kitchen elements that everyone had in their houses, so ubiquitous that they went unnoticed. And God used them to save the world. These two elements in the hands of the master become more powerful than any sword, more reliable than the most technologically advanced army, more effective than the hottest app or life hack right now. That's how we become human again. We let Jesus take ordinary things of our lives and use them to transform us and the world around us. And that's how we participate with him in rescuing others too. We can join Jesus in his rescue mission by picking up the frying pans we have lying around our houses. What do you have around you already? What's so ubiquitous you don't even see it anymore? God just did this for me right before I left to fly out here. I was visiting my grandparents who are in their 90s, and my grandmother feels overwhelmed and isolated because my grandfather has dementia. We got to talking about how much she loves musicals, and I asked if she had seen Hamilton, because it's the best. She said she hadn't, but really wanted to. And one thing leads to another, and before you know it, I'm installing Disney Plus on her smart TV, loading Hamilton onto her watch list. And she's absolutely delighted. Because in doing that, I'm showing her that she matters. I'm showing her that I see her, that I care. And I wonder if that was God's nudge to me. Sometimes my grandma can get frustrated by things and she's got a lot of weight on her shoulders. But I think doing things like that communicate that she's loved. They tamper down the dragon in her and in all of us. So what do you have? What frying pans do you have lying around your house? If you've got a frying pan, cook something. Do you have dining hall swipes? Invite somebody to lunch. Do you have books on your shelves that you're not reading? Pick one, maybe your favorite, and lend it to someone everybody else overlooks. Have you got knowledge or opportunities someone else could use? Maybe you don't need to do all the things. Make the extra money, get all the credit. Who needs that honor more? Because we have no idea the dragons God can slay. We have no idea the humans that God wants to draw back out using just what we have around our house. Let's slay those dragons with love. Thanks be to God.
Thank you for joining the Damascus Road podcast. Our mission is to follow Jesus together by being with God, loving everyone, transforming people, developing leaders, growing new ministries, and changing the world. You can can find out more about us online at DamascusRoadTucson.com.